Hello, everyone. I'm Sue Holmes, the Deputy Executive Director for Professional Learning at IPA, and we want to welcome you to today's IPA Talk. Today, we're going to focus on the School Leader Evaluation Plan. IPA was one of the architects in developing the plan, along with collaborative partners across the United States. We piloted this plan in the 22-23 school year, had a number of pilot participants from 16 different districts. With us today on our panel, we have two of those superintendents who were piloting that process. We'll get a chance to hear from them, as well as Brian Zwemke from Oswego and Morgan Holyvote, who is actually a leader who's been evaluated under the plan, just to get their perspective on what the plan has meant for them in terms of piloting and moving forward. So without further ado, let me introduce our participants. With me today, I have Dr. Mike Lubefeld. Mike, would you introduce yourself just briefly?
Sure. Hello, everybody. I'm the Superintendent of Schools, North Shore School District 112 in Highland Park and Highwood in Northeast Illinois in Lake County. Was a pilot superintendent with the principal evaluation plan and have gone from one principal to three principals. And next year, all 9 principals are going to be using the plan. Been a public school superintendent since 2010. Really proud to be here with the IPA.
Thanks so much, Mike. Jill, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Jill Griffin. I'm the superintendent of the Bethalto School District, and we are located about an hour and 15 minutes south of Springfield. And this is our 3rd year. We were a part of the original pilot as well with the IPA. And as we're actually going into our 3rd year. So in year 1, we did the pilot with the IPA. Year 2, we onboarded all 5 of our principals. And then this year 3, we're actually adding our assistant principals. And so all of us will be using the same tool this upcoming school year. So I'm really excited about that and feel like we've learned and grown a lot through this process.
Gosh, thank you so much, Jill. Brian, would you share words about yourself and give us a little introduction?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me today. My name is Brian Zwemke. I have the privilege of serving as the Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources in Oswego Community School District 308. We are in the western suburbs. We're the 7th largest school district in the state, and we are just getting to learn about the paradigm and are preparing for a pilot and are excited to be here, looking to support our principals so we can support student learning in our great community.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. And Morgan Holyvote, would you share with us an introduction and tell us where you are?
Yep. Hi, everyone. Morgan Holyvote. I am the principal of Denning Elementary. It's a pre-K through 2nd grade building in West Frankfort, Illinois, Southern Illinois, near Carbondale. And this was my first year using this evaluation tool as an administrator. And I'm excited to share all the amazing benefits and successes with you today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Morgan. So by the way, I just want to give a little additional background about the evaluation plan. As part of IPA, this is my 7th year at the Illinois Principals Association. I've been so fortunate to be part of this national, what we kind of look at as a PLC of leaders from across the state and across the nation that have come together really to build a new framework that describes the work of the principal. And we call that the school leader paradigm. If you've had a chance to see it, or if you haven't had a chance to see it, you can visit it on our website. But it really brings into bear what we refer to as the intelligences that a leader needs to be effective. So from the business world, we talk about EQ, right? Emotional intelligence, where we've really not addressed that heavily over the years in developing our school leaders. And so a lot of research went into identifying the intelligences that the school leader needs to possess or work on to be strong and to be an effective learning leader in their organization. On the right-hand side of the paradigm, we break down the activities, the skills, the work that the school leader has to be doing. So we break that into 3 domains. We talk about the culture, systems, and learning. And within each of those domains, we see 7 dimensions of work. So for example, in the culture domain, one of the important dimensions is that of building relationships. So the school leader paradigm has gone through several iterations. The first publication was in 2018. The most recent version was published in 2022. And as we've been going about talking with districts about the paradigm, having universities adopt the paradigm for discussion in principal and superintendent prep programs, the question kept coming up, why do we have a different evaluation plan, Sue, aside from the paradigm? Because when we talk to leaders, they say, gosh, what is in the paradigm is the work we're actually doing. We can connect to the language of the paradigm so much better than we can connect to the standards that we're used to. And so, well, Sue, you're saying to yourself, but the statute says that the principals have to be evaluated based on the standards. Yes, it does. But the great news is the school leader evaluation plan has been crosswalked. It not only encompasses the standards, I would tell you it goes beyond the standards and really helps the leader identify their strengths and areas for growth. So we decided to pilot this evaluation plan, reached out, as I mentioned earlier, Mike and Jill were two of our 16 districts that jumped on board. We spent a lot of time meeting with them virtually, providing opportunities for them to give us feedback, corrective action that maybe needed to be taken. We added efficiencies to the plan before rolling out the training really statewide in this past school year. What happened as a result of that was there was a great interest by ISB and the PX subcommittee in looking at this plan, because historically individuals that were earning the initial principal evaluator designation for their PELs were going through a 2-day training that was not really based on a framework. It was more case study driven. And the part that was introduced about student growth was really more focused on the student growth as we think about teachers, not so much about the student growth piece that administrators have to consider in their evaluations. And so through the year, through multitudes of meetings, the PX subcommittee and ISB adopted the school leader evaluation plan now as really the framework for individuals earning that initial principal evaluation designation, or for the next 5 years, individuals that need retraining on principal evaluation. And I want to make one clear distinction here. Despite the fact that we're introducing this plan through those training mechanisms, there's no expectation that a district adopt the plan. So a district might be introduced to the plan, not unlike districts that may be introduced to the Charlotte Danielson framework in the initial teacher evaluation training, but then go back and implement Marzano or a different model. So again, the emphasis here is on what does good principal evaluation growth look like? Just a few statistics, and then I'm going to have you hear from our guest today. But a few statistics that are pretty alarming is that we have a lot of turnover in the principalship. In 5 years, if you have 4 leaders start, one of those leaders will remain. So we all know of situations where it's been a revolving door for some schools. You have a leader come in, and then you have another leader come in, and in some cases, we've worked with districts where we've seen as many as 6 principals in 5 years. And the research tells us that it takes 3 to 10 years to make effective academic changes, to implement new systems that will change the outcomes for kids. And when you have principals turning over like that, the research also tells us that when a principal leaves, academic progress generally declines. And so now you have another set of years where you've got to put time and energy into trying to get back to where you were and even move ahead. So it's really important in our minds and across the nation that we focus on not only strengthening our principals, but really growing them to keep them in their seats. So, that's just a little bit about what led us to this work. And Mike, I'm going to throw the first lob out to you, if you don't mind. Would you talk a little bit about what interested you in participating in the pilot, and then what you've seen as you've gone through this past 2 years?
Absolutely, Sue. Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here with you, with my wonderful colleagues as well. In District 112, for many years, we were using the PIAC principal evaluation model. We still used it this year for people not part of the pilot. I'm one of the people who was trained by the state and the ROE to actually train on AA 1865. So I know it really backwards and forwards. I know the case studies, understand the ISLIC standards. And as someone that supervises, evaluates, and coaches principals, I always felt it was a bit cumbersome to go to all 6 of the standards and all the 50 or 60 rubric points and work with them. And I felt we were simply getting a general smattering through the evaluation and supervision process that was not as rich and robust as coaching conversations that we also do, or professional learning network meetings that we do. So separate from principal evaluation, in District 112, the teachers union and the administration had been working to evolve away from Danielson into Marzano, which we just did last year, which was a neat partnership. So the eyes and ears were open about possibly doing something different with principals. And as soon as you announced this pilot, this program, I have been familiar with the school leadership paradigm. And for those of you with hair like mine who've been around, this is like a modern version of Bowman and Deal. So you've got the community context, the political context, the school context, the individual context. The program looks at the principal as a human being, as a learning leader in personal, social, and systems intelligences, as Sue mentioned. And then operationally, you're really looking at the domains of culture, systems, and learning, which is part of everything we're doing. That was interesting. I shared it with some of the principals. One of our principals said, "Hey, I'll do the pilot with you. Let's try it. This seems interesting." And we did it. What we found was rich, deep, ongoing professional conversations that were more analogous to our coaching conversations that we felt were more valuable as the superintendent-principal relationship. And then we felt we also had an evaluation tool or instrument or whatever you want to call it, a document that more accurately reflected this principal's learning and growth, my assessment of her work, and it also set us up for next year of, what are we going to look at? Final point, Sue. In the old model or the current model that some people have, I would always have to print out student assessment data, organizational culture data from the school. I'd have a nice little portfolio. What this model does is the principal and the supervisor together in the instrument have an entire sheet for data. So we're talking the same language. It's been eye-opening. This year, 2 other principals joined in the pilot, so we had 3 of us doing it. We convinced everybody else. We're actually doing the training next August, or this coming August, and everyone, principals and associate principals, are all going to be using this model. And I just couldn't be more excited as a sitting superintendent to actually see this going forward, because the conversations are richer, the opportunity to supervise and evaluate, but have some meaning for the support of the teachers in the school, support staff, and obviously the students, is really operationalized from this model far better, in my experiences, than the current model. Thank you.
Gosh, Mike, first of all, thank you so much for your words. Really, it's very inspiring to hear you speak. I want to say 2 things. First of all, I'm looking forward to being one of the co-trainers in your district come at the beginning of August. Dr. Kay Dugan and I will be there, and we know we're going to have a great time and be working with some folks that have a little bit of knowledge, but still are, yearning for a little bit more. And I want to also point out, in case I forget before this chat is over, that there is a free digital tool that goes along with the evaluation plan. So folks that are thinking about the plan do have that shared document that they can use as they evaluate other folks. Now, there are other models of that. We've worked with Evaluize and Super Eval, so both of those companies include this evaluation plan as an option, but I do like people to know that there is a free version as well. All right, enough of that. I'm going to go to Jill next. Jill, would you mind unmuting and sharing with us your story?
Sure. So as I shared in my introduction, we were a part of the pilot, and it was our high school principal and myself. And that was 3 years ago. It's hard to believe it was that long ago, but my high school principal is he's a rock star. He's been doing it a really long time. And I went to him and I said, hey, I'm really interested in this tool the IPA is rolling out. I said, for me as a district leader, and this is my 8th year, or I just finished my 8th year, I found the old instrument. I felt like I would hunker down in my office in January and February, or at home on the weekends, whenever we could squeeze it in, and write evaluation after evaluation after evaluation. And I would finish and I would check all the boxes. I met with everyone, had my summative conferences, but I never felt like it was as meaningful as what it could be. And so I have had coaching training as well. And I knew it could be a more powerful experience. And so I went with the principal who had the most experience on our team, someone who I knew needed to be pushed, and I didn't always know how to push him sometimes. And so I really was interested in us doing this together so we could learn and grow together. And that's exactly what happened. We met on Wednesday mornings. That was our coffee. We would meet over coffee. Their high school's right there. So he would come over, and we would sit down and we would have conversation around the tool. We would talk about the different aspects. We talked about the dispositions, work that, we had conversations that we never had previously around evaluation. I think the intelligences are a great aspect of this tool. The way that we moved the self-assessment to the front of the cycle versus being at the very end of the cycle, that made no sense to me previously. And really, I give this example in some of the trainings or podcasts that I've given. Justin and I sat in my office one time, and I'll never forget, we were talking about a cycle of inquiry. And we joke with him, and I know I can say this because I've asked him, he has ADHD, and I probably have a little bit of it myself, but we sat here for 3 hours and we didn't realize 3 hours had gone by. And we were just engrossed in conversation. We were looking at his data. We took a deep dive into it. And at the end, we both were like, oh my gosh, it's 11 o'clock. And so, it was just a different type, and it was conversational. We had lots of spreadsheets and data around us, but it always came back to the conversation and what we were going to do to move the needle at the high school as far as student achievement went. We were looking at 5 essential data. And I think for us, that's when we knew this tool was different. And so I loved, we both loved it. We introduced it to the other principals in the district. We went to SIU Edwardsville and trained with Sue and Kay, and I brought all of them with me, which highly recommend that. I just did a training last week in Carterville, and I can just tell you, it is so powerful when you're in there with your team of administrators and you're all learning the tool together and talking about what implementation can look like in your district. You're bouncing ideas off of each other because it can vary, and it's a flexible and adaptable tool. And so for us, we onboarded our remaining 4 principals in year 2. And then in year 3, this is the year I just trained the rest of our team last Monday, I believe, and really got them fired up about it as well, and just explained to them how important it is. And I think, some people might say, well, why an assistant principal? And my question or my response to that, this year I did both. I was in the old tool with them and I was in the new tool with my principals. That was a little bit chaotic. And then you see it side by side. And it was so clear to me that it wasn't as meaningful as what it could be. And so again, onboarded our assistant principals, and then thinking about them in terms of preparing them, Mike Lubefeld and Nick Poliak, I went to their Aspiring Superintendent Academy 8 years ago, actually 9, or no, it was 8. And one of the best things that you ever said, one of the best pieces of advice you ever gave was the importance of us growing others. And you guys spent a tremendous amount of time as a brand new superintendent. You really impressed upon me the importance of pouring into our team and really trying to do a better job of growing and developing people in a way that makes them feel supported. And so always trying to perfect that, always trying to get better. And so we did that last Monday. And then it was really interesting to hear some of their feedback. and they're ready for it because they felt a little bit slighted by me last year because they weren't on the tool and the rest of us were talking about it in admin meetings and things like that. And they just didn't necessarily feel as included. And so for us, it's been a journey and it's been a worthwhile journey. Like I said, the beautiful thing about it is the ability to pilot and be flexible in your district. And I tell everybody that as I'm looking at you, Brian, and thinking about you taking your school district through this process, I've told them over and over again, I said, this is a pilot. We can do what we need to do, but I can tell you the process, it is a coaching tool for sure. And it's a more meaningful process in this way because our conversations are so much richer. So I think I probably answered more questions than you asked to, but that's our journey. That's why we're here. And that's why I feel like I'm a champion of this tool.
Listen, I call you one of my disciples.
I am.
That's how I refer to you. I refer to you as one of the disciples.
I am. I have bought in.
We have had the opportunity, you and I, to chat so many times. We had one 911 call where we helped a principal that had a kind of a mental block about doing, knowing what to do and how much to do. And so it's just been a great partnership. I'm going to come back to you guys because I got a couple of other questions, but I want to have Brian talk a little bit about what their vision is there in Oswego, because they've got some exciting plans. So Brian, would you talk with us a little bit about what you guys have going?
Sure. It's wonderful to be here today. And I think it's just another great opportunity of why it's so important to have a strong professional learning network, is because, the work that we're about to engage in, we have some warriors that have already been out in front in yourselves and a principal here and two superintendents and this full support of IPA. So, our district is always changing and always growing. We really have focused in on trying to create a number of priorities in our district along with our 6 core values. So in Oswego 308, we talk about empathy and dignity and humanization and integrity and courtesy and collaboration. And we started thinking about what's the most important thing that we're trying to do within our school district. So it's student achievement, it's taking care of kids, it's having those foundational practices of rightful presence and strong instruction and good teamwork. And so as a district leader on our team, we talk a lot about that it's not really about the district. It's about us leading through the principal so they can do their work with their staff, so their teachers can do their work with their students. That's a mind shift for district level employees. So if we all said, and I have 23 plus schools with a number of principals, great people, assistant principals, deans, wonderful system, great board, wonderful union, incredible community. What makes a good principal? And if we all listed out on a piece of paper who we think is the best, or which principal is doing well with communication or with social intelligences, do we know why? And so what this will do for us in a large unit school district, as a LUDA school district, it allows us to create an operational definition of what a quality learning leader is, how to support our building principals, how to grow our building principals through an aspiring leadership program that we're partnering with Aurora University. And it allows us to create a common language for our teachers through 5 Essentials to say, this is what an effective leader looks like in our school. And if we can operationalize that definition and take as many of those intangibles and subjectivity into objectivity, similar to Danielson and similar to Marzano, then we're all talking the same language. And we're saying, this is what effective school leadership looks like. And then building folks can expect district to speak that language, because not everybody at the district office has had the privilege to serve as a principal, and not every teacher will serve as a principal. And it's important that we just have a common definition of this is what a strong principal looks like. And we have so many great leaders in our district right now. And so to be able to focus really right now, what we're trying to do is focusing on the becoming part of the paradigm. We just had 3967 last week with Jason coming out to meet with a number of our leaders. So we're primed to focus in on the becoming side, The learning side of the next group will be coming later for us in the summer. And we're still determining how many should we pilot? What should we do? We'll be talking with Jill and Morgan and Mike certainly offline to think about how much is too much. Can we go slow to go fast? And really trying to make that distinction of what's the best course of effort in a district of our size so that we can support ultimately what our goals are. And that's rightful presence for students, quality instruction, and great teams.
Gosh, Brian, I tell you what, I am so inspired also by the words that you're saying. You're building a mental picture for us of all of the fantastic things going on in Oswego. It's a beautiful portrait, and I'm very excited that we're partnering with you. I know, again, I'm looking forward. Janice Schwartz and I are going to be up there to do some training with your folks later in July. So excited to be there as well to really kind of experience a little bit more about your district. I myself, as I like to say, a recovered superintendent, so was in central office for 25 years before being given the privilege to work with IPA and lead professional development with the association. So, Mike, when you talk about the old system, it is the system that existed when I was working to evaluate principals. And I felt personally that we never did it justice. And I want to share with you guys something that came out. So Kay and I were in Teutopolis, Illinois. So if you're listening to this and you don't know where Teutopolis is, they are the home of the wooden shoes, by the way. And it's an amazing community. And we got a chance to be there with representatives, superintendents, and principals from 5 different districts during the day. And this one statement came out of this, one of the statements that came out of this training, which I think really sums this up. They said, this is a way of saying to a principal, instead of doing evaluation to you, I'm doing, or working with you to let you grow. And I think that boils this whole plan down to its very core, is that I'm not doing this to you at the end of the year after all the check boxes are checked. And another superintendent said, Sue, I always have the best of intentions. And then it gets to be February, which statutorily, we have to finish up the evaluation in February. And I'm I'm going quickly through these 50 boxes. And I really don't feel like I've ever given it the justice it deserves. And so, man, what you guys are echoing about your experience is really what those of us that were part of the writing team were hopeful. Those of us that have evaluated principals in the past really thought it could be. And so just seeing it kind of come to fruition is really rewarding for us and for our collaborative members. All right, Morgan, you have sat there so quietly, but we want to hear what you have to say, because you, went through this process this past year. So can you describe what it was like as a person growing through the plan as opposed to overseeing and, working with another leader?
Yeah, definitely. So I had attended training actually with Sue last summer with district leaders. And I have to kind of preface this whole thing by saying I actually accepted my current role. I'm going into my 5th year next school year, but I accepted this current role in January of 2020. Pre-pandemic, stepping out of a classroom straight into head principal position. I think I'm just piggybacking on what you just said about old evaluation model versus this, because I knew as a brand new administrator walking through very uncharted territory for a couple years alongside every other administrator during that time period, that there were certain things that I was being reflective on that I knew in terms of emotional intelligence and personal intelligences, that I was putting eggs in that basket, that I knew that I needed to grow in personal areas to be an effective leader, but that really wasn't at all addressed, or I didn't feel like it was addressed well in the previous evaluation model. And I felt very divided, right? Like I'm putting a lot of work and effort into growing myself personally as an effective learning leader, and then shifting my focus also to this evaluation cycle that I just never felt like it was really meeting the mark. As far as the implementation of the plan, I mean, we hit the ground running. We dove in. All administrators utilized this tool this school year. I think for me, the golden nuggets in this model absolutely are based on the personal reflection. I mean, that is such a critical component of our day-to-day work. And as much as we know it's important and we know that it's pivotal for effective leadership, time management is always a challenge. There's more and more being added to your plate, not much being taken off, and really finding intentionally those spaces to have that personal reflection is really built into this model. I personally really appreciated the self-assessment in the personal, the social, the systems domain. It allowed me to have a framework, as Brian said, to really put language to those areas of focus and to have those conversations based around a common language. It's really easy for us as leaders to, everything needs to be fixed and everything needs to be fixed right now. And this allowed a framework to really have intentional reflection and to really prioritize the areas needed and the best areas needed to increase that student performance, learning and outcomes, but also to be the kind of leader that my staff needs me to be for that continual growth. I think for me also, the premise of this model being based on the cycles of inquiry is really huge. I'm currently doing a lead project with the local ROE that's also based on cycles of inquiry, and for me, this completely integrated my school improvement plan through the cycles of inquiry work, the work I was doing with the lead project through the ROE, and my growth as a leader, all interwoven into really one framework for growth. And so I think that cycles of inquiry piece is, really a major component. We're diving into that data. We're making decisions that are data-driven. We are identifying those really specific learning problems or problems of practice, instead of just kind of hodgepodging, picking out of a sea of all the things that we can improve. And I think the most important thing is, as an administrator, narrowing that down to, a couple areas of growth that you're going to create an action plan for the school year and really affect change. I think the other big piece for me, like Jill and Michael and Brian all kind of reiterated it, as well as Yusu, is the coaching and collaborative and supportive conversations really are unparalleled through this model. It's really set up in a way that empowers the school leader to really own the change and own the actions that are being taken in the school setting, but with the support and in collaboration of, your superintendents and your supervisor. And it no longer feels like you stated, that evaluation is being done to me, but I am creating the change alongside my district leadership with their collaboration. There's so much more buy-in, and it feels absolutely more authentic, intentional, and I feel like our energy and work has a much more intentional pathway for effective change. I also really appreciate that it's a continuous model. So it's not you just checking the box, we're done for the school year, and we'll pick it back up, in August when the school year starts again. It's building on the work that you did the previous year to the next year, and in that way really following that cycles of inquiry. The work is never done, and it just evolves over time, and we continue to come back to the table and adjust and analyze and kind of together decide what's our best plan or course of action. But I think that the true change really starts with the school leader, the administrator really owning that reflection and really deciding personally, how do I become more of an effective leader for the benefit of my school, my staff, my teachers and students. And so our plan moving forward is, I think, to just strengthen the process. I think when you go through it the very first year, everybody's just, you're just maneuvering through it, and I think when you get through the first year, you kind of say, okay, this is what it looks like, and now let's build on that. And I think that the conversations, even though they were fantastic this year, I see those becoming more in depth and even more intentional coming into this second year. So it was a very productive, beneficial, rewarding experience. And I don't know that too many administrators would honestly say that maybe about the previous system, that it was a rewarding growth experience.
Gosh, Morgan, it's such a great opportunity to meet you and hear about your experience when Jason and I were at the SIUC Carbondale Law Conference, and we were just really struck by, your personal reflection about what the process meant for you. And thank you for articulating that so clearly. One of the things you said, and it's something that Jill really emphasizes, is the idea that this model mimics or really duplicates the whole idea of school improvement. So one of the things that we talk about in the training is the fact that if you have a new leader who is unfamiliar with school improvement and they work through this model for professional improvement, they're learning what a school improvement cycle looks like. On the flip side of that, if you have people that have been doing school improvement for years, this should not feel like a big change to them, because whether you call it plan, do, study, act, or in our case, we say plan, implement, assess, and reflect, it is a cyclical process. I love what you said about the fact that we're never done learning. We never get to the end of the highway. I like to say that the on-ramp to the cycle of improvement for this school leader paradigm and evaluation plan requires a little bit of reflection, right? It requires a little bit of work on the part of the evaluator when you adopt the plan. But doesn't it make sense? And Jill, I'm going to have you speak into this. Having that data come to the beginning of the process so we can really speak intelligently about what maybe our problem of practices are, instead of waiting until Mike says to me at the end, Sue, this was a real issue. You really need to work on that next year. Let's just have these conversations and be very, to use your word, Morgan, intentional about how we work together this year. So Jill, can you speak into the idea that this sort of represents and how you are pulling all those different systems into play this year?
So I think what you're referencing, I was thinking about something else too that I want to tweak moving forward, but I think what you're talking about is we have a district strategic plan, and then that funnels down to the buildings, and they have their school improvement planning process that they go through at the building level, which in turn then becomes part of the problem of practice or the cycle of inquiry. And so what I had told our administrators at the beginning of this school year was, don't reinvent the wheel. Look at these problems of practice or these cycles of inquiry as something you're already doing. And so it's not an additional thing, but it's an opportunity for you as a building leader to take a deep dive into your data and look at it from a position of how you can grow and lead your building through this process. And so we talked a lot about the cycles of inquiry on the front end of it. And then we ran out of time at the end of the school year. And so we're looking forward to next year. And I talked about this in Carterville last week too. You know, you have to really give yourself, and this is kind of to that next question, I think that we're probably going to be talking about too, is really looking at how you implement the tool and what you bring in when. Because, you know, as I think about having a brand new building principal this year, my focus with her is just going to be on culture and thinking a lot about relationships and establishing culture. And we're going to look at that culture domain in depth, and we're going to make sure those pieces are in place, you know, because that's the foundation of everything else. But then I mentioned my experienced principal that I piloted with, and he's going to be he's very strong in systems. So we're really going to be looking at the learning domain with him and diving in deep to that. And so really the other piece of this that I like, so we talk about, you know, the strategic plan, which is our district plan. We talk about building improvement, and then we talk about growth from the individual principal level. How unique of an opportunity is this for me as a district leader to individualize and really look at this at an individual level? And the slide deck that I think Jason's the one that has the continuum in his slides, and we use it in all of our presentations. But thinking about what brand new principals need, what principals need in years 2 and 3, years 3 and 4, and then knowing, like, statistically, it takes the principal 5 years to really hit their stride as a building leader, and setting it up in my head, you know, and that's how I'm really looking at it moving forward. I've got a principal who's going to be a 6th year principal, and what he needs from me versus what the beginning of the first year principal needs, and having an opportunity to individualize and coach according to those different stages of development and growth. And so, I don't even think I answered your question, Sue. I feel like I went down my little rabbit hole there.
Yeah, you're good. You know what? I love this. And I think we could probably talk all day about this because, you know, I think we're all that really committed to it. So yeah, you spoke into the idea that the SIP, right? And the professional growth of the individual can be tied together. One of the things we emphasize in the training is we're not looking for binders of evidence, for people to bring in binders of evidence and dissertations to really support. In fact, here's an idea that came out of the last training we did. Loved it. Kay and I both loved it. And that is, how could the leader just take some photos of the work that they're doing and capture kind of like some visual evidence of some of the impact they're making? And I'm like, how simple would that be? And then sitting down and looking at some pictures and having those be the basis of the conversation, because we want this to be about coaching and conversation, not about putting 4 3-ring binders together and slapping them on Brian's desk and saying, here you go, when you get a chance to go through all of this, maybe we can change that.
Sue, and I think it's really important to mention 2 things. Number one, I don't like clutter of any kind or paper. Probably like Mike, a digital guy. But those things, you know, we've seen that story before when we've done teacher evaluation and bring the binder, and it didn't lead to. It led to compliance and evaluation, and didn't lead to coaching. And I think it's the same piece here. Is if we can stay away from the binder and stay true to the continuous cycle that Morgan is speaking to, then we can have an opportunity really for growth and coaching.
Absolutely.
Well, I love what you said about that, Brian, because I think too, Sue referenced this earlier, but when we were looking, one of the things that we did this year was we took individual components of the tool and we broke them down and we unwrapped them. And we were looking at, I think it was the culture domain, and it was the beginning of the year self-assessment. And one of our administrators spent like a lot of hours on a Sunday, you know, all of these things I do to build culture in my school. And that's what she used to do with the old tool, right? I'm going to give you all of this evidence of all of the things I'm doing to build the culture of my school. And she spent a lot of time on it. And we had kind of an emergency 911 call with Sue and Kay. I'm like, hey, we can't, you know, I don't want these people working on the weekends on this kind of stuff. And so what did we do wrong? What blind spot do we have? And we talked through it and fleshed it out. But basically, all of that is conversational, which goes back to what you said, Brian. It's not about stuff. It's about having conversations. It's not punitive. It's not about being compliant. It's about support and growth and this ongoing cycle of learning and growing, and even together alongside one another versus I'm the person who knows all these things because I don't. I'm growing alongside you and learning with you. And so we had a little snafu this year, and it because they did what they knew. They went back to that old frame, of, oh, I have to put all of this stuff in our Google self-assessment. And so they did that with a self-assessment with this tool, and it wasn't at all what we needed. And it became much more conversational after we had that touch point with them. And so I like that you said that, because it made me think about, something that I make sure I bring up whenever I'm with people is, do not go through and answer all of those questions. It's a couple bullet points under each of those dimensions, or under each of the
Mentions, you're right.
okay, I'm like, so it's under each of the dimensions, and then we talk about it, and that's it. So we don't want them spending a lot of time on that.
Mike, any thoughts? You're coming your way?
Yes, so I'll share affirming everything that my colleagues have shared, and an is on the old model, current model. I've always felt very compelled to fill out every single rubric and every single point, and it was really like what others have said. I was checking the boxes off. With this process and with this set of documents, it really opened up a monthly visit at the school to sit down and have a conversation or be thoughtful about, let's talk about the culture domain and what are these dimensions? What does it mean? How are we doing it? Let's go look around. Let's go see it, versus what are the expectations of my formal observation? And it became less clinical and less sterile, and it became more meaningful. Bottom line is, IPA has a ton of administrator academies on this. So if someone is thinking, gosh, maybe I really want to try this, join one of the administrator academies. They're all over the state. They're everywhere. Talk to us, who are in the pilot or whatever, talk to your IPA field services director. For someone like Brian, who's got, nearly 30 schools and a number of folks, I would put it out to your team and just say, I'd love 5 people to try it this year. Let's get a cohort. Who's interested? Who's willing to take a shot at it? And then Brian, maybe you and a couple other principal supervisors get trained, and you've got your cadre, your cohort, and you report back to your team, similar to what Jill did, similar to what I did. And then in year 2, expand it, maybe to double it or do more. My system here, 4,000 students, 9 schools, 9 principals, about 7 associate principals, 8 associate principals. We are waiting to year 4 to launch it for everybody. And we had a nice slow roll up where we talked about it. Part of it was our own operational bandwidth. Part of it was, do we like this? And yeah, we do. And part of it was, why do we like it? Which is a lot of the illustrations that we've shared today. And I think, Morgan captured it from the practitioner's view. It was meaningful to her. Jill and I are into development of others, as are you, Brian. So you put all that together, it's a framework that makes sense. And if we didn't fill out a spreadsheet, or if we didn't do 3 inquiry projects, we did one where we never used to do any. And then we talk about it with some teacher teams too. We've got relatively small schools here. So we talk to the teachers. What are we looking for? What are we doing? And you get to a concept of innovation. Well, you start defining it vis-a-vis the school leadership paradigm. You get to operationalize it vis-a-vis this evaluation tool, but really this evaluation process and concept. I think it's brilliant. I'm completely sold on it. And I encourage anybody out there listening to simply get the training. My advice, start small, then scale up. It's overwhelming, and it really is a totally different approach, totally different than the 6 ISLIC standards and 7 gazillion rubric boxes. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Gosh, thanks, Mike. I want to kind of just wrap us up with a few words here. I really appreciate all of you being with us today. It's so powerful to hear the practical application, right? What the outcome is, because we were very intentional from the get-go that this was not going to be as is, here it is, take it or leave it. This is going to evolve, as it did significantly after really implementation in that pilot year in the field. Mm-hmm. Lots of our collaborative members looking to implement their statized version of the plan, of this growth plan. Alaska, for example, probably going out to Alaska to train up their superintendents and principals. sometime this fall on the plan. Washington State, which has been a very tight partner with us in the paradigm, looking to have their state actually adopt the paradigm evaluation plan away from their current plan. New Jersey's doing some work with us. I mean, it's just really exciting because people see the value in this whole idea of reflection. I want to close with two things. First, I want to say, I want to add a little bit, if you've ever read any of the Wallace research on effective principals. So they did a study that came out in 2007 about the importance of principals, and noting that principals were the second most impactful person for student outcomes in the school. They came out in 2021 with a new study that not only puts the principal at the same level of importance as the classroom teacher, but even suggests that the principal may have a more of an impact on the outcome of student achievements in the building. And so that is based on the meta-analysis of the research out there, the importance of building up your principal. We can no longer afford to hire a principal and say, here are the keys to the kingdom. See you in February. We'll talk about all the boxes. If we are really looking to grow our schools and really support those kids, whatever the system is you put in place, it needs to really consider, the leader. And one other thing, of course, if you have too many goals, you have zero goals. So the idea that Morgan talked about of solidifying those areas of practice that you really want to hone in on, really want to build a cycle of improvement on, is so critical, because otherwise we're like, I've got a million balls in the air. Which one that doesn't hit me in the head do I try to improve on today and tomorrow? Being cognizant, of course, of the work of the school leader in general, but really being intentional about improving. So I want to share my screen for just 1 minute, and I'll ask my good friends if they can see my screen.
Yes. Looks good.
So this is just to say a little bit about the training. So we've talked a lot about what this is, how do we get training on this? So from the IPA website, I just want to point out a couple of important areas. Under resources, we see that there's a box, a link to the school leader paradigm, which here is that framework document. And the resources behind it. We really don't even have time to go into all of that today, but I will say on the Explore tab, because Mike, you talked about this, we have developed professional learning on every single one of the competencies under the intelligences and the dimensions of the doing side. So let's say we wanted to help someone that was new with relationships. They can come to this page. It's sort of like a Netflix screen. Here are all the admin academies we offer, all the on-demand academies that folks could take related to that dimension or their work there. Here are all the free ELN courses that people can take tied to that dimension. Every one of our pieces of PD is tied back to the paradigm. So that we're able to filter this at that paradigm level. And then finally, if folks are looking to learn about the evaluation plan, you can come under learning. You can find this evaluator training link. Hopefully it's going to come up. I see the spinning going on. That might mean someone in the backside is working on it. So, all right, come on. Let me see if I can.
It's 1 o'clock.
Oh, here we go. So there's those that are seeking the initial principal evaluator designation. This course is now the 2-day course that replaces the old 2000. So here are our upcoming sessions on that. Folks that need the retraining for their principal evaluation, they'll be taking the same course. So we show them there. And then IPA is unique in that we also offer a one-day course,
Mhm.
number 3967, which is a one-day overview of the evaluation plan. It does not count for evaluator retraining, but it does count for AA credit. And so this course has been really popular with districts calling us and asking us to bring this one-day course in to really provide an overview, especially to people that don't need that designation, but they're going to find themselves actually evaluated under the new plan. So with that, I just kind of wanted to point out, if folks wanted to learn more, where they could go. We've got an FAQ there if people are wondering, oh my God, Sue, what has changed as of July 1st, right? The evaluator requirements have changed. You didn't hear about that. This is the first time you're hearing about it. You can go to our site and find the FAQ about that. More than anything else, I want to say thank you again to my good friends, Mike Lubethel, Jill Griffin, Morgan. So glad to have gotten to meet you. You are, I'm sure, doing rock star things in your district. You know, I can just feel that from your presence and your content. And Brian, we're so excited to get to know you, me personally, and to work with your school. Thank you for taking time to be with us today. I want to share out with anyone that's listening, if you have questions about this. I know any of these folks on this call would be happy to connect with you, as are we back here at the association. Myself, Jill is one of our trainers, Kay Dugan, Jason Leahy. So please don't hesitate to give us a call. I hope this message finds you finding some time for a little bit of, reconnecting to yourself. I'll reference one of the intelligences, the personal intelligences under competency about wellness, trying to be fit and healthy. There's Mike's Star Wars background. And anyway, keep doing great things for kids, guys. Keep making people better, helping leaders grow. It's what we need at this time and in always. Have a great day, and thanks again.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.